Welcome to America's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast, and of course on Facebook Live. And if you have questions on Facebook Live, submit them because I am here, and I am Kevin Acee. I really should usually say your name first, but today I'm going to say I am Kevin Acee, San Diego Union-Tribune columnist, and Eddie Brown, fantasy football expert for the Union-Tribune. If you take his advice like I do, then you're doing pretty well. Well, unless like I do, you have Aaron Rodgers or had Aaron Rodgers and Leonard Fournette. Eddie is a miracle worker, but he doesn't heal people. Okay. Right. Eddie, the trade deadline, the real football trade deadline, passed this week. What are the fantasy implications of this? Let's start like Ajayi switches teams from probably the sinking Dolphins to holy smokes, the NFC East leading, NFC leading Philadelphia Eagles.
Right. Well, obviously the hope is he can finally get into the end zone. I'm thinking he's going to have a pretty decent chance week in and week out, more opportunities. If you're an Ajayi owner, you were doing backflips when you saw this trade because you were thinking, he's doing well, but he's not scoring. The Dolphins are sinking. Things seem bad. Now his season's rejuvenated.
So, big deal. That's what I thought. Huge ascension. At some point, you're like, I own Ajayi. I thought I was going to get more. Now You're like, oh my gosh. All right, the other one, speaking of backflips, if you're a 49ers fan like you, doing backflips, possibly, you're like, well, yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo, we just got a quarterback. Oh, Kyle Shanahan, someone to work with. But let me ask you this. Right. Not only are you a fantasy football expert, you know real football. I would think we've got a matriculation issue. Where Garoppolo, the 49ers stink. They have nothing to lose by basically treating the rest of these games as Jimmy Garoppolo practice for the rest of the season.
Right.
But when do you expect that he would play for the 49ers, and what would his fantasy impact be for the 49ers?
Well, my first instincts, like you said, as a Niners fan was, are we just going to bubble wrap him for the rest of the season? There's no reason to play him.
Well, yeah, Joe Staley's out.
Right. So let's just put him on the sidelines and we'll pick up next year. But they're not. Shanahan's going to, they want to see what they got. Mm-hmm. This is the last year that they're working on his original contract. He's going to get a huge bump in salary, obviously. Next year he's a free agent. So they're going to play him. Maybe as early as against the Giants in a couple of weeks. Potentially, I think at the latest would be against the Seahawks after their bye week.
After their bye week, right. Yeah. What a perfect time.
Yeah. He'd have 3 weeks to soak in the offense and then just throw him out there.
Okay, so how desperate, and maybe it's me with no Aaron Rodgers, and if Phillip Rivers, who was my backup, and like this week, if Garoppolo were playing, I would have, hey, cool, I'll take a flyer on him, right? Is that what it would take to start Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yes, I think going forward, he's a potential streaming option. So like you said, if you still have a quarterback that's on a bye in the next couple of weeks and he starts, then throw him out there. There are some matchups after their bye that are not bad for the Niners. The Niners haven't been Cleveland Brown awful. They've been bad, obviously. They're 0-8, but 5 or 6 of those games they lost by 3 or 4 points. So they're going to compete, and I think Garoppolo wants to he's trying to earn that $20 million a year contract. Man. So it's not like he's going to be sitting on his thumbs. He's going to go out there and he's going to perform. So if you're in a desperate situation, it's not a bad flyer.
I was remiss to move on. I was just so excited when you said the whole backflips thing, and it got me thinking about how excited you would be with Jimmy Garoppolo. But we started with Ajayi. So I was remiss to say, well, what's left in Miami in his wake? Do you pick up his replacement?
I think the secret here, and a lot of people don't remember this, is Ajayi, before he went on his 200-yard purge last year, wasn't going to be the starter. Kenyon Drake actually won the job initially, I think, and they were happy with him. Ajayi came back after a suspension and was able to go on his stretch, and then from then on, he's the number one guy. I think there were some issues. There were some personality issues in Miami, and if Acee is willing to trade Ajayi, and like I said, Ajayi should be great in Philly, but I think they're happy with Drake. I think they're willing to give him a shot at this, and he was a very talented back at Alabama. There's something there. I think a lot of people are undervaluing him, and so if he's available, and I think he is in most leagues, and we'll talk about that later, then you should go out. You should go out and get him, especially if you have Ezekiel Elliott, if you have somebody like that.
So that versus one of the two guys, McFadden or slipping my mind,
Alfred Morris.
Alfred Morris.
Yeah.
I was thinking about one of those two guys, but maybe look elsewhere because you don't really know what the Cowboys are going to do.
Yeah, we have a little bit of an idea, but we definitely at this point we won't know until they go on the field.
All right. We had to start there on America's Finest Fantasy Football podcast with the trade deadline because that's it. It's over. But let's talk about some other things that happened last Sunday and try to play them forward. And how about Martavis Bryant? First, let's talk about how, unlike some other NFL players who don't really understand this fantasy football thing and how it puts money in their pocket, Martavis Bryant of the Pittsburgh Steelers gets it.
Well, Juju Smith-Schuster.
Martavis Bryant doesn't get anything.
He doesn't get anything.
Juju Smith-Schuster, the rookie receiver who had 190-something yards on Monday Night Football because Martavis Bryant couldn't keep his mouth shut. Juju Smith-Schuster gets it.
Yeah, he gets it apparently all over the place. Like he is shining in a big way. Unlike we've been talking about, we've talked about in multiple episodes where there are players that are very negative when it comes to fantasy football. Schuster is actually going out on Twitter and saying, "Why aren't you starting me?" I don't recall ever a player being that active and that aggressive towards his Twitter followers or towards his fans.
And
saying,
based on the other stuff he does, Eddie, I think he really was having fun.
Yeah,
that was cool.
He's all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing hide and seek with a kid at a Penguins game, and he's doing he's trying to find his bike. He's doing all kinds of things on social media. So I think he's a kid that really does get it, and like you said, Brian really doesn't get anything,
and he gets it too. He got it on Monday Night Football.
Oh, big way. In a big way.
So is Juju Smith-Schuster a guy you're like, okay, I'm not going to get 190 out of him or 97-yard touchdowns or whatever it was, but I've got him on my roster. I'm starting him?
Yeah, you should. But what's surprising to me is we've been kind of talking about him for about a month now, and he's still only owned in 29% of ESPN leagues.
Wow.
I mean, there's a discrepancy between ESPN and Yahoo where he's owning like 66%, but 29%. Come on, guys. Like, what's the weight?
Speaking of guys that we've been talking about for weeks, and you have been high on him, but also, understandably, Eddie, like, okay, gosh, I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a gap somewhere or a slip somewhere, especially on the road. Deshaun Watson. It's over, man. He's not a rookie anymore. He's a fantasy football star.
Yeah.
Okay.
Borderline God at this point. Like I said, like you said, I thought there'd be if there was going to be a hiccup, you would think it would be in Seattle. But I think we learned a few things from the Seattle Texans matchup. One was definitely that Watson is matchup proof going forward. I mean, the two games that he's had at Seattle and at New England, which you would outside of maybe at Kansas City is probably the toughest place to play in the NFL. He's averaged 350 passing yards, over 50 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's his averages in those two places, and he's a rookie. So at this point, I'm not doubting Watson. He can play anywhere.
And in real football, he is getting the praise from guys who've been around the league for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as in, this is for real, Deshaun Watson.
Definitely. I mean, people to this, and it was interesting of the matchup against Seattle because there's a lot of comparisons against Russell Wilson.
Right. And then Seattle's defense and Richard Sherman being one guy who said, hey, whoa, generational talent here.
Yeah.
In Deshaun Watson.
And those guys, when they say something like that, you listen.
Trade deadline for fantasy football. That is upcoming?
In most leagues, it's probably anywhere from a week or two to the end of November.
I haven't even, as a fantasy football rookie, right? I'm just kind of staying in my lane. I'm working the waiver wire like a madman. Like I'm a waiver wire whore.
That's
WWW. Okay? but trades, I'm just not, no. All right?
Okay.
First of all, my roster sucks. Anyway, but give me some things like if you have a guy on your roster that maybe people would be surprised that they could get a lot for, or that they might be able to, I don't want to say snooker, but maybe like kind of get more for than they might think.
Well, I think now that we're like you said, we're past the NFL real trade deadline.
Right. It's
time for fantasy owners to start thinking about their trade possibilities. You always say waiver wire, most important thing. After the draft, waiver wire is the most important thing because it's essentially free. You can get the bigger boost that way. Trades, obviously.
Week to week, give them back.
Exactly. You throw them back if they don't work. It's not a big deal. Not really a commitment. Trades, obviously, you're giving something away, so you never know. You got to balance it. You got to know the owners you're dealing with. There's a lot of stuff going into it. And so the next couple of weeks are pretty important, especially if you're trying to make a big change, if you're trying to make a big move. There are some guys, though, I think going forward that are buy low candidates, sell high candidates. As far as buying low, somebody like Lamar Miller, the Texans, I wasn't that high on him going into the season. But what I'm seeing is he's now in an elite offense, which we didn't know going into the season. He's on pace for over 250 carries. And everybody thinks we're 1 week away or a play away from D'Onta Foreman taking over the lead back role there. But that's not happening.
Right. At some point you say, wait, that's not happening.
Yeah, he's had 50 carries. He's been solid. He's averaged 4.1 yards a carry. He's not. They're going to keep going to the veteran Lamar Miller, and he's healthy finally. Go to the owner, that has Lamar Miller, and because he might think, hey, yeah, D'Onta Foreman's going to take over this job. So there's a chance that you might get a guy who's playing in an elite offense, a running back, that, going forward, it has a very, very, very high floor. And that's a good possibility. Somebody like Mark Ingram for the Saints, who ever since Adrian Peterson was traded to the Cardinals, has essentially been a top 5 back. There's another situation where people are thinking, oh, well, it's him and the rookie Alvin Kamara. He's splitting time, everything like that. He can't keep up this pace. Well, it's essentially the same thing Atlanta has going on with Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, to where Ingram plays the Freeman role, which is a pretty significant role, and going forward could be a top 5 back. But most people, if they own Ingram, might not think that. Okay. So it's another situation where you're buying low, even though he's playing well right now.
Give me one more there.
Marcus Mariota, another buy low. Marcus Mariota, not playing well right now, but going forward from weeks 12 to 15. He plays 4 straight games against teams that are in like the bottom 25 against quarterbacks in fantasy. The number 29th team, the 26th team, 28th, and the 31st team. Back to back to back to back, all the way through your semifinals.
So you might buy low, and Marcus Mariota, provided healthy, provided playing like he can.
Right.
Is carrying you into and through the playoffs.
Yes. And this is a situation where maybe you have your quarterback.
Right.
But maybe you check that, schedule.
Like if I'm miraculously with Aaron Rodgers, if I'm without Aaron Rodgers, right? Miraculously was in contention still, this could be a buy for me.
Yes. And you target him because right now he's probably not even starting for his owner. He probably was drafted as a starter, but that owner probably started scrambling once he started struggling.
There are probably a lot of people out here, Eddie, out there in the fantasy football world who had Aaron Rodgers. Their team was doing pretty darn well and are now would think this would be a great pickup.
I think it would. I mean, he had a similar stretch last year. Where there were 6 games against subpar opponents against the pass, and he lit them up. And for that 6-week stretch, he was the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. So he's capable of doing it, and he's probably about as close to 100% as he's going to get. Also, there are the sell high just quickly. Yeah. Speaking of another situation with quarterback, somebody you normally wouldn't say, hey, maybe you want to sell high on this guy or trade this guy in general, but Drew Brees. And here's why. They're becoming a more balanced offense. Just like I spoke with Ingram and Kamara. I mean, this week, Brees didn't even throw a touchdown for like the first time in a couple of years. He's on pace for 4,400 yards passing and 25 touchdowns. Now, do you need to shop this guy and get rid of him? No, he obviously is a solid fantasy contributor, but that's not. I mean, it's been like since 2007 since he's thrown under 30 touchdowns. He's probably going to throw under 30 touchdowns.
Sell high. Another way to put that is like, only take a certain price. Put him out there. Dangle him.
See what you get.
There you go.
The same thing, and lastly on this is Will Fuller. And obviously we've been, everybody in fantasy, analytics is basically saying, how can he continue what he's been doing? I mean, he's essentially a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside of Enigma, right? Because he has 4 games where he scored 7 touchdowns and 13 total receptions on only 22 targets, and that's only happened once in the history of the NFL. A guy that most people out there probably aren't going to remember, Mike Sellers, scored 7 touchdowns and only 12 receptions and 16 targets in 2005. So obviously he has a connection with Watson. Obviously you're going to start him going forward. You can't help but start him. But his value is as high as it's going to get. So like you said with Brees, throw him out there, see what you can get.
Or a week ago you were talking about a guy who maybe was 2 weeks ago, because Aaron Rodgers is out and the offense of the Packers is clearly changing. But you might be able to get another owner on name value alone to go for Jordy Nelson.
Yes, definitely. And in this situation, I mean, it's another example of a sell high, where going forward, he's going up against 4 teams that are top 10 against wide receivers in fantasy. So not only has the offense changed, and he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers, Superman at quarterback, but he's going up against a tough schedule with an unproven quarterback. So if you can move him, now is the time to do it.
Eddie, before I get into a little preview of your Week 9 start and sit, and we're on America's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast, Eddie Brown, it's at SDUT Eddie Brown?
UT Eddie Brown.
Oh, you didn't add the SD.
I do remember.
You know that was a directive years ago.
It was.
You just went
I missed
at
the email.
UT EDDIE Brown.
Brown, yeah.
Okay. Before we get into a preview of your column, Start and Sit, that hits on Thursdays at 11, I just want to say this. You are your own ombudsman. Every week, you call yourself out, highlights, lowlights. I don't care any lowlights you had, like sit Deshaun Watson. If anyone took your advice, start Juju Smith-Schuster. Nobody has any room to complain about. I mean, you won people games last week.
I like to.
And that wasn't obvious. It wasn't like, hey, start Tom Brady.
Yeah, especially on the road.
Yeah, you didn't
against
know.
Detroit, primetime game. Roethlisberger struggles on the road. I mean, that's known. He's not the number one guy. Obviously, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. There's mouths to feed. But I thought Smith-Schuster at that moment would perform. And 97-yard touchdown. But even without the 97-yard touchdown, he would have had like a 96-yard game for 6 catches. That's productive. I mean, I think the kid's for real.
All right. We'll pause real quick before I get into start and sit for, I guess this could be start and sit. A question on Facebook Live. Matt Stafford or Tyrod Taylor?
Starting this week?
I assume that is what the question that producer John Kelly is holding up from Facebook Live. Start one of these two guys, Stafford or Taylor.
You know what? Let's see here.
I mean, Stafford, wasn't there like some insane statistic, Eddie, from last
Yes.
week? I mean,
Yes,
when I
was.
saw because I was doing some other things, I was doing our Pro Football Doc stuff, and I saw his stats. I'm like, wow, the Lions lost? Has that happened before? I mean, I know it has. I watched one time when Phillip Rivers had 512 yards and they lost.
Right.
But holy smokes.
The stat was actually quite ridiculous. He's the only quarterback in the last 20 years to have a game of over 400 yards and no touchdown. He's done it twice.
No touchdowns.
Yeah.
Because that was where I was blown away when I went to look at the stats. Wait a minute. Whoa.
How
did you keep it within the 100 yards and throw for 400? You never got in the end zone? Wow. Something.
Yeah. No.
Now, why would this? Because generally, Eddie, and I know that you're being extremely prudent here. You're making sure that you give good thought to this question about Matt Stafford, Tyrod Taylor, but you're usually like this with the answers. What's holding you up here that you would actually even consider this?
Well, they both have great matchups.
Okay.
Taylor's going up against the Jets. It's a decent matchup. Stafford's taking on the Packers. They're reeling right now, so you don't know what their mindset is. The defense also has been, kind of mediocre against the pass anyways. He's starting to heat up. He didn't throw any touchdowns against the Steelers, but you have to remember the Steelers' pass defense has been one of the best in the league this year, especially after adding Joe Hayden. So he's had over 700 yards passing the last 2 games out. There was a bye sandwich in between those 2 weeks. So they're both good matchups. Taylor has a very high floor because of his, mobility. They just added Kelvin Benjamin, so he's probably going to want to get him involved as quickly as possible. If I have to pick between the two, I'm going with Stafford, just because it's a Monday night game, I believe, against Green Bay. It's a must win.
Every time out, Stafford is capable of that 400-yard or
and 4 touchdowns.
320 with 4 touchdowns.
Yeah,
right.
He's capable of that. They are inconsistent, but he's capable of that.
Tough to sit. I know you're a big matchup guy. I love that you. That's why I asked you about your process. I love that you even considered this question. Tough to sit, Matt Stafford.
It's very tough. It's very tough, and I have him in 2 leagues too. So it's one of those things to where I actually back it up with I'm starting him too.
All right, let's get to Eddie Brown's very popular. And when I say that, what I mean is that on the Union-Tribune website, when this thing hits at 11 a.m. Pacific on Thursday, it will skyrocket to the top of the most trending. It'll be the most read thing for several hours and stay up there. That's people trusting. And then on Sundays, boom, it takes another vault on Sundays as people in the morning are trying to take Eddie's advice. And that's week after week. So what that tells you is, they took his advice and they came back for more. Thank you, Eddie. May I have another, is what they said. And so let's do a little preview here. Now, you generally don't go for the gimmies, and there's some big names on here, and I'd like to just preview a little bit. Spoiler alert, folks, if you like to check it out online, Thursdays at 11 o'clock. But Jared Goff of the Rams, I've heard you go kind of up and down or a little bit like wait and see on Jared Goff. Tell me about your reasoning for starting Jared Goff of the Rams.
It's totally matchup driven at this point. They're actually decent against the run. So I could see them focusing on trying to stop Gurley.
When you say them, you mean the Giants.
The Giants.
You like that matchup 7 days out of 7, twice on Sundays.
They've completely struggled against the pass. The last 4 games, they've given up either 3 touchdowns or 300 yards passing, and they've just suspended their best cornerback, Janoris Jenkins. So I think Goff has a really good. There's a good possibility he's going to go out there. Cooper Kupp, Sammy Watkins might even be a decent start this week. Robert Woods, there's some good options.
So another matchup, related issue or situation would be Adrian Peterson against I believe, league worst, at least against fantasy in terms of fantasy. The 49ers league worst against running backs.
Yes, and you can say that going back all the way last year. So you're talking about 2 years running. If we're talking about a sample size, this is all the sample size you need. And they're going to be starting, they're without Carson Palmer, so they're going to be focused on the run. That's pretty much the focal point of their offense now going forward is going to be Adrian Peterson. They struggled last week because they got behind. I don't really think they're going to have to worry about getting behind against the 49ers, so I expect all day to have a pretty decent outing.
I'm going to ask you this, because you have another little preview here of your starts, and that is T.Y. Hilton of the Colts. And I'm wondering, is T.Y. Hilton still a big? Is he owned in a lot of leagues?
Yeah, the ownership is still there. Even starting is still there, but it's becoming frustrating. He had a solid start to the season. People were kind of concerned because there was no Andrew Luck. Then Jacoby Brissett wasn't that bad. But he's been struggling of late.
And that's what I should have asked. Is he? I know he's owned. Is he started in a lot of leagues? And some people are.
That's starting to dip.
Okay, but you're saying this week.
This week, once again, because we just saw the Texans secondary against the Seahawks. They're struggling as well. And so it's one of those situations to where if they're going to focus on getting him involved, and he's one of those players that needs to be involved if he's going to be happy, so the Colts are pretty aware of that, this would be one of those weeks where they're going to get him some bounce back because the last 2 weeks has been insufferable for him.
The big takeaway, people listening to Eddie Brown, is in 4 leagues, playoff contention in all of them. I assume year after year you are, Eddie, because honestly your advice has worked out for me and countless others who read you. But the big takeaway is matchups. You're matchup man.
Yeah.
That is the thing. If you're going to do nothing else, obviously you got to work the waiver wire. You got to get into trades every once in a while. But matchups. You're like real estate. It's the equivalent of location.
That's a great analogy. Yes. I mean, it's one of those things to where, if you have Aaron Rodgers, if you have Tom Brady, I don't worry. Now Deshaun Watson, then don't worry about the matchup. But for the other 90% of players out there, it's one of those things to where sometimes you're going to have 3. The questions I get on Twitter are, there's these 4 guys. Pick 2 of them. Well, usually they're all, when I look at them and I'm trying to help people out, I look at them, I'm like, there's very small differences between these guys. So what's going to make the difference?
Who are they going
against? Who are they going against? Because if sometimes the other difference might be this person has more opportunity, this person has less opportunity. Well, that's an easy answer. But for the most part, it's who are these guys going against? Well, if one receiver is going against Denver and the other one is going against the Niners or the Colts or the Texans right now, then I'm going to tell you to start the guy going against the Colts, not Denver. You don't want to touch them. So I think it's very important to focus on that week in and week out.
Give me a sit, a big name or somebody where you're saying, I think this will be this week's one where people go, what is he talking about? Sit this guy.
Well, I'm thinking Devontae Freeman. We talked about him earlier in comparisons with Mark Ingram. He already has a big up shoulder. Which caused him to receive fewer touches than Kevin Coleman last week, which concerned a lot of owners. And now he's facing a stout Panthers run defense, which I think is top 5, maybe top 3 against running backs in fantasy on the road at Carolina. So that those factors, tells me that when you have somebody as talented as Kevin Coleman there, if you're not perfect, if Devontae Freeman's not perfect, the Falcons don't have a problem with featuring Coleman. So, he could easily just not be there. It might be one of those weeks where, he gets dinged up early on. It's like, hey, it's not worth going. Let Coleman handle it. And then he comes back next week.
Eddie Brown, as always, I learned a lot. I don't know at this point in the season it can help me, but I know that you are helping many, many others. At UT Eddie Brown on Twitter. We will see you next week on America's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast.
Take care.